Namaskar and welcome to the episode number 5 of the Pustakalya wala podcast, which is going to cover the last part of the chapter 1 of Susan Pocket's book, Nature of Consciousness. It's about memory and attention. Memory and attention are the last two things that need to be understood as intertwined with consciousness in such a way as to be problematic when you try to get the proper data from experiments, right? Why? Because we want to separate the processes that lay down new memories, that um, access old memories and all those things from the actual perception of whatever we are testing, right? So that we can find the actual patterns, the actual electromagnetic field patterns for the specific stimulus, right? So to do that, you need to understand what they are. Memory is not very understood, neither is attention, even less so in a way. Memory, there are three different classifications that she tells us about. The first one is declarative versus procedural. Declarative would be something like this and this happened on this and this day, right? Procedural would be more like I learned how to play guitar. It's in my long-term memory now. Second one is classification is iconic versus short-term versus long-term, which is also kind of similar. Iconic is what happens as soon as something happens and you start to remember it. Short-term is when you keep it for a little while, 2-3 days long, and long term is of course like years and years of memory. So the second classification is more about how long it takes, how the length of time. The third one is kind of confusing with the first one, but it has 3 instead of 2 classifications: procedural versus semantic versus episodic. And I'm not really sure of any of these, but I'll try to explain. Procedural is same as what we explain in the first one. A procedural guitar, playing a guitar, blah blah blah. Blah, shouldn't say blah 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 in a podcast, but okay. Semantic is how is it different from procedural? I'm not sure, but episodic, I know. Episodic is like what happened Sunday morning, what happens, episodes, episodes of memory. So we'll jump to the next one. Working memory. Now this is the actual place where it actually interferes quite a lot, because working memory, first of all, it's not really clear which part of the brain working memory works on. It can be multiple. The mechanism is not clear. The term is imprecise. It covers more than one classifications in the previous classifications that we mentioned. Working memory you can think of as just this list of 6-7 things that you can hold into memory. If I tell you a phone number, let's say, and you have to remember it before you are able to put it into your phone, that's working memory. Okay. Now he's talking about mechanisms of memory, how memory is clear. It's not really how memory is stored. It's not really clear, but there are some theories. The first one is it's stored by modifying the connection between nerve cells, right? Modifying. But how is it modifying? There is this long-term potentiation and long-term depression. If you use a connection a lot of times, it will strengthen the connection, and if you don't use a connection, it will depress the connection. I mean, it's fine. I mean, I'm ambivalent about how it relates to what. It's not really that interesting to me right now because it's not going anywhere in this regard. But we'll continue for the sake of solidarity. Sea slugs and snails have this entire circuitry that is known to us. Like, it's very simple. Their neural circuits are very simple, so we can study some of their behavior, and it turns out that it's possible that LPT, the long term potentiation and long term depression, LTP and LTT are sufficient for those type of learnings that we can experience in not experience but that we can notice in these snails and slugs. And different type of memory actually feels different in from personal experience. She talks about the fact that can be memory used to be thought as this one thing, was one place which holds and stores, and like we compartmentalize everything in our lives. We try to compartmentalize memory in the brain, but it turns out it's not like that. It's almost all of the brain is required for different parts of different ways of storing and retrieving. And it does feel different to us, right? Learning to play the guitar and remembering how to play the guitar feels different from remembering your graduation day or remembering your wedding day or whatever. It does feel different. Perceptually, it's different to get that data from your mind. So, why should it be from the same part of the memory, right? Okay, so there is another um, understanding of long-term memory processes. Hippocampus. Hippocampus is the thing that is used to process long-term memory. So if there is some injury in hippocampus, it will be the person won't be able to create long-term memories. This is the case in the movie Memento. The protagonist, played by Guy Pearce, beautiful actor, very wonderful actor. He has this condition where he cannot make new memories, but the old memories are fine. There is no problem with actual long-term memory and retrieving that long-term memory. It's just that new memory cannot be formed because of the hippocampal. We actually don't know in the movie, but there is an actual patient. There used to be an actual patient called HM who had this same problem. Sadly, he died. Rest in peace. He's one of the pioneers of research on one of the main subjects. Separating working memory from consciousness of the present object is the problem that they face, and that's why they are studying this, because they want to subtract the creation of working memory, the creation and retrieval of working memory, and the actual perception of the object, because you want to study the perception. So you want to remove all the patterns, all the electromagnetic field patterns that are created because of this working memory processes. How do they do that? There is this way to do it. This experiment called delayed matching to sample tasks. So this is the task. You are sitting in front of a screen. There is this one object that comes in front of you. This one abstract shape which is made of colors and some lines and all that. It's very abstract, right? And then it vanishes, and there are 4 options: maybe delayed, maybe instantaneous after that, and you have to match which one was the one that you saw. And in this case, you can actually what you can do is you get the initial perception, and then you subtract the delayed phase patterns from the initial perception, and that kind of gives you, because initial perception was of actually looking at the object and the memory and work and the memory process. And when that initial pattern vanished, you lost the perception, but the working memory was still there. So in that delay phase, phase, we just had the working memory, not the perception. So if you subtract those patterns from the first one, you'll get the patterns related to perception. This one is going to be a little longer than 10 minutes because I want to finish this chapter now. And you can separate the long-term memory processes. It's harder to do that for long-term memory rather than working memory. But one morbid way to do it is to find a subject with broken hippocampus, the HM guy or the memento guy, to do experiments on. I don't know much about all those. I didn't learn a lot from this last part. Now we come to attention, where I learned even less because nobody knows how it works. There are two competing theories. One is the spotlight theory, and the other one is the filter theory. The spotlight theory is when you're attentive to some object, it's like a spotlight that is focused on that object, and if you want to change the attention to something else, the spotlight moves to the other object, and it's like a light that shines from your eyes, or even metaphorically, think of a book, think of a bus now, think of a car, a train. So it kind of somehow feels like a spotlight moving through different areas of your memory. The second one is filter. You're filtering your attention to one specific object. If you didn't filter, all of the perception would come to your mind at once. So attention can be looked at as a subtractive process rather than an additive process. And this is where I feel it would be nice if people who are scientists working on this field would be more into contemplative practices of meditation and mindfulness. Because according to some mindfulness practitioners who have submitted their subjective experience of being in this mindful state of taking in everything, attention actually does not feel like a spotlight. It feels like a filter. And the mindfulness process is to kind of let go of the filter and take in everything at once. And attention can be when you are, and that at that point, at that instance, when you are letting everything come to view, it does not feel like a spotlight. It feels like you are letting go of a filter. It does not feel like you're doing anything at all. It does not feel like you're it feels like you have stopped doing anything, and in which point all the perceptions come into the limelight easily. The sights and the sounds and the thoughts and emotions all can freely flow through, come and go. I'm not saying I have experienced that. Maybe in very, very small moments when I'm in 10-day meditation retreats, one of my 10-day meditation retreats, might have experienced that, but I only have memory of it, and maybe that is false. So, having said that, we have come to the end of the first chapter. Very, very informative chapter, very interesting chapter. From this point of view, that I learned how hard it is to get data for any such theories. It's a lifelong process of gathering data. You require many people's expertise. You require the expertise of people who are making EEG machines, who are using EEG machines, who can understand the data, who can understand how different type of processes might interfere with the data. And in the summary of this, I must say that there is some utility to the first person experiences. And I would have loved if more people in research were contemplatives. I've said that before in the same podcast, but because I have these first person experiences, but I am not scientifically trained to be able to go through with it as well as some scientists here are. Because when you read the chapter, when you read the part on attention, the way the discussion on this has gone on, it is still very useful and very informative to a layman. Just the way in which a scientist looks at the problem of attention and trying to understand that problem of attention in memory. And you would just hope that those people go through these long-term contemplative experiences so as to get the data firsthand for their own understanding and providing better theories of these things. Maybe that won't work, maybe that'll work, but it's just extra data, and that extra data are those extra data are important because, in as we have established beforehand, in studies of such kind where you are understanding and trying to understand the first person perspective, the consciousness, the very definition of the first person perspective, the evidence gathered in the first person should be important. And having said that, I would stop because it's already 17 minutes now. And I'll keep this podcast unedited because that's how it should be. I've been editing quite a few episodes, taking out the ums and ahs, but it's okay. I think it's fine to keep some irregularity. That's the part of the process. So I'm gonna stop here and see you tomorrow with the second chapter, third chapter, fourth chapter, and fifth chapter in the next few days, where we go through the evidence since we have established how to look at evidence.